وأن هذا العلم مخصوص بما قد شاع فيه عند كل العلماء.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله وحده والصلاة والسلام على من لا نبي بعده. أما بعد، إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. Indeed, in the last week we have lost a number of scholars and students of knowledge, and from them are two great scholars of Islam. Earlier in the week, Shaykh Ubaid al-Jabiri passed away, rahimahullah ta'ala, and today our dear beloved Shaykh AbdurRahman Mohiyudeen passed away in Al-Madinah. And we say, as the Prophet ﷺ, he said, as has been narrated in Bukhari, when his son Ibrahim passed away, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, إِنَّ الْعَيْنَ تَدْمَعُ وَالْقَلْبُ يَحْزَنُ وَلَا نَقُولُ إِلَّا مَا يُرْضِي رَبَّنَا وَإِنَّا بِفِرَاقِ عُلَمَائِنَا لَمَحْزُونُونَ. Prophet ﷺ in the last line said Ibrahim, and here we say our scholars. Indeed, the eyes shed tears, and the heart, it is saddened, and we do not say except that which pleases our Lord subhanahu wa ta'ala. And indeed, we are saddened by the departure of our scholars. Allah Azza wa Jal, He made from the signs of the hour, the signs of the coming of the Day of Judgment, the departure and the removal of scholars, and the raising of knowledge. The Prophet ﷺ, he says in a hadith that has been authentically narrated in Bukhari, إِنَّ مِنْ أَشْرَاطِ السَّاعَةِ أَنْ يُرْفَعَ الْعِلْمِ وَيَثْبُتَ الْجَهْلِ وَيُشْرَبُ الْخَمْرِ وَيَظْهَرَ الزِّنَا. Prophet ﷺ, he said, indeed, from the signs of the hour is that knowledge is lifted, and that ignorance becomes firm-footed, and that zina and fornication is or alcohol, and that alcohol is drunk, and that zina and fornication becomes widespread. Prophet ﷺ, he also mentions explicitly in another hadith that has been narrated by Abu Darda. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَنْتَزِعُ الْعِلْمَ انتزاعا من صدور الرجال وفي رواية من العباد ولكن ينتزعه بقبض العلماء حتى إذا لم يبق عالما اتخذ الناس رؤوسا جهالا فسئلوا فأفتوا بغير علم فضلوا وأضلوا. The Prophet ﷺ, he mentions in this hadith, indeed Allah Azza wa Jal does not remove knowledge by taking it or snatching it from the hearts of men, and in a narration from the slaves, but rather Allah Azza wa Jal removes and takes away that knowledge بِقَبْضِ الْعُلَمَاء, with the death of the scholars. And in another narration it says explicitly after that, بِقَبْضِ الْعُلَمَاء فَيُرْفَعُ الْعِلْمُ مَعَهُمْ, with the death of the scholars, and then knowledge is taken with them. Yani that knowledge that they had in their hearts and that they memorized, and that the understanding that they had, that is taken away with their death. And the Prophet ﷺ, he mentions the virtue of the scholars, these scholars that are departing and passing away, and they are a sign that the hour is coming closer. Their deaths is a sign that the hour is coming closer. The Prophet ﷺ mentioned to us their virtue in Islam and their station in Islam whilst they are alive. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, إِنَّ فَضْلَ الْعَالِمِ عَلَى الْعَابِدِ كَفَضْلِ الْقَمَرِ لَيْلَةِ الْبَدْرِ عَلَى سَائِرِ الْكَوَاكِبِ. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, indeed the virtue of the scholar over the abid, the worshipper. And note, these are two categories of good. good righteous people, scholars and ubbad, worshippers. These worshippers, they worship Allah Azza wa Jal, but they don't have a lot of knowledge. And so they recite the Quran plentifully, they pray plentifully, they give a lot of charity and fast a lot, but they don't necessarily have ilmun kathir. And so the Prophet ﷺ is comparing these two. The Prophet ﷺ is not comparing the scholars with non-Muslims or the scholars with people that are fusaq, open, oppressive sinners. La, the Prophet ﷺ is comparing them with another group of righteous people in Islam. And so what is the comparison? The Prophet ﷺ, he says, indeed, the fadl and the virtue of the scholar over the worshipper is like the virtue of the moon, the full moon, Laylat al-Badr. And that is the 13th, 14th and the 15th of the Hijri or the moon calendar, the monthly moon lunar calendar, over the rest of the stars. The full moon that you see that is beautiful, glowing, bright. What's the comparison of that beauty and that glowing light compared to the stars? It outshines it. La kalam, there's no debate about that. And that is the comparison that the Prophet ﷺ and the method, the parable he gave with the scholars and the ubbad. So what do you think about the comparison between scholars and those that are lower than those worshippers? فضلهم عظيم. And then the Prophet ﷺ, he continues, إن العلماء ورثة الأنبياء. Indeed, the scholars, they are the inheritors of the prophets. And indeed, the prophets, they did not leave behind for inheritance dinar wala dirham. They didn't leave no money. They never left nothing of the dunya. What did they leave behind? ولكن ورثوا العلم. They left behind knowledge. فمن أخذ به أخذ بحظ وافر. And whoever takes that knowledge, then he has taken a great portion and a great share. And this is what the scholars have. Allah Azza wa Jal, he says about those scholars in Islam, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Ask the people of remembrance, the people of knowledge, if you do not know. And Allah Azza wa Jal, he also says about the scholars in the Quran, إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاءِ. Indeed, those that truly fear Allah Azza wa Jal from His slaves are the scholars. And Allah Azza wa Jal, the Prophet ﷺ, he even mentions that all of the malaika, they make istighfar, they seek forgiveness for the scholars. حتى الحيتان, even the fish that is in the sea makes dua, because they are muallim al-khair, they are teachers of good. And their circles, the Prophet ﷺ, he gave it the parable of it being like a garden in paradise. The Prophet ﷺ said in a narration, if you want to see rawdatun min riyad al-jannah, a garden from the gardens of paradise, then you go to the circles of knowledge, hilaq al-ilm. And the Prophet ﷺ, he mentions from the virtues of their sittings that the angels, there are specific angels assigned to look for the majalis of dhikr, those circles where Allah Azza wa Jal is remembered, and they are called al-malaikatu sayyara. They traverse and scour the earth looking for these majalis, these circles. And if they find a circle of dhikr, remembrance, from them is the circles of the ulama and the sittings of the scholars, they go on top of one another, the angels, up until they go to their Lord, and they have a dialogue with Allah Azza wa Jal. They have a dialogue with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which we're not going to mention here due to the length. But in short, at the end of it, Allah Azza wa Jal, he says, bear witness. He says to the angels, bear witness that I have forgiven them. Those people that are sitting in the circle of knowledge. And then one of the angels replies and says, indeed amongst them was a man who never came for the circle of knowledge, basically. He came for a need, a hajjah. And in a narration, he was mar. He was just going by. He was walking by and he saw it and he sat down. And so Allah Azza wa Jal, he says, they are a people that their jalis, whoever sits with them, la yashqa jalisuhum. they are a people, whoever sits with them in this circle of knowledge, لا يشقى, they will not become wretched. And so Allah Azza wa Jal forgave that person as well. That person that came to the lesson just for a need, or maybe he was just walking by. Allah Azza wa Jal forgave him also, and this is the virtue of their sitting. In this clip today, I wanted to mention some of my memories with my dear Shaykh, and there are many, but not to bore you and make this long. I'll just mention and share a few nice, fun memories that I have of the Shaykh. First recollection I have of the Shaykh is I was a new student, just came back from the summer holidays, and he had a lecture in Masjid Quba on the Huquq al-Walidain and the rights of the parents. And it was an eloquent, beautiful lecture that I remember vividly. And I remember having a thought to myself, I would love to study with this Shaykh. And alhamdulillah, lo and behold, a mere year later, I began studying with the Shaykh in Masjid al-Nabawi. He had a private sitting where 5, 6, 7 brothers would sit around him and they would read books to him. The Shaykh would sit every Monday and Thursday after Maghrib, and almost every day after Fajr. They were reading tafsir to him after Fajr, and after Maghrib there was numerous books being read to him of different types, in Aqidah, with Qawaid Arba'a, Usul Thalatha, Fath al-Majid, and other than that. From the benefits that I got from the Shaykh are 2 types. Of course, and the obvious one is knowledge, and I'm not going to mention that. That is clear. The 2 types that I'm going to mention outside of that is, number 1, the manners of the Shaykh and the way he carries himself and the way the students act with him. And so what I benefited was that, mathalan, the students, and I'll start with the students, they would service the Shaykh, they would look after him, they would wait for him at the door, they would take his shoes for him, they will put it under racks, they will get him water, they will get him a chair, they will let him sit down, they will get him tea, even to the extent that one of the brothers, وَهَذَا أَحْسَنْ مَا رَأَيْتَ, he would even massage the feet of the Shaykh. He would stretch his feet because he was an old man, he was above his 70s, so he would seek permission, and he didn't have to seek permission, but he would, out of good manners, and he would stretch his feet in front of us. And then one of the brothers, Jazahullah khair, may Allah reward him, he would massage the feet of the Shaykh, and I even remember how he used to do it. And so he would massage the Shaykh's feet because the Shaykh was getting tired and he's old. And this is ahsan ma ra'ayt, the best that I've seen. In fact, when I went back in the summer, a specific technique that he was using, I did it to my mother's feet, and I began massaging my mother's feet in that same manner. And my mother said, "Where did you learn this from? Who taught you this?" And I said, "I learned this in my Shaykh's lesson." It's not just knowledge that we learn from the circles of knowledge. That was the best that I saw. And on the way out, likewise, they would help the Shaykh up. They would get his shoes for him. They would get a chair for him to sit at the door, service him and put his shoes on for him, and walk with him to his car. And on that walk to the car, he would laugh with them and he would mention stories with them. And how many beautiful stories the Shaykh told us in that walk. From those stories that I'll mention quickly is that he mentioned that he would have a motorbike that he would take from his house to the university every morning, and he lived near Masjid al-Nabawi. So he said he would pick up who? He would pick up none other to ride behind him, none other than the Imam of Mecca, the famous reciter Ali Jabir. Ali Jabir used to ride behind Shaykh AbdurRahman Mohiyudeen, and he would take him to university, and they were good friends. And in fact, he said that his older brother's car, that's the car that they learnt how to drive with in the university car park. The second thing that I benefited from a lot from the Shaykh is his acts, his ibadah, his worship. And this is something that is azim, that you learn and that you see from the scholars, their act of worship that has ta'thir upon you. And so from the examples of the worship of the Shaykh is the Shaykh, as I said, he would teach us every Monday, Thursday for a reason, because he would fast every Monday and Thursday. And not just fast, he would fast and he would always break that Monday and Thursday fast in Masjid al-Nabawi. Even if he was traveling out of Medina, he would still fast on those days. And so Mondays and Thursdays, he would fast continuously and he would break his fast in Masjid al-Nabawi. And those are the days that we used to study with him. And he would also fast the 3 white days of the month, the 3 days of the month. He would fast those days and he would break those fasts in Masjid Nabawi and would read to him those days. And the best month for us was Muharram. Why? Because in the month of Muharram, that was the month that he would fast the most. He would fast every Monday and Thursday. And on top of that, he would fast the 3 white days of the month. And this is every month. And then on top of that, he would fast extra voluntary fasts because it's the month that the Prophet ﷺ used to fast the most. طيب? And so this is one of the acts of worship that athara fiyya, from just seeing him doing so in his old age. And when he was breaking his fast in Masjid Nabawi with people similar to him in age, amongst them was his own blood brother, his older brother, AbdurRahim. And he used to attend the lessons with us sometimes. And there was so much mutual love and compassion between them, that which gives an example to the people of how they should be with their siblings. May Allah Azza wa Jal rectify and strengthen and feel love and compassion between us and our siblings. He would break fast with him. He would wait for him to start his lesson. If his brother was in Masjid al-Nabawi and they broke fast together, he wouldn't begin his lesson up until his brother came to the lesson. And likewise, his brother, whilst coming, would never come except that he brought tea and specific dates for his brother that is teaching. Look at the love and rahmah between Mashaykh, something that I benefit between the Shaykh and his older brother. There are many stories that I can mention that I personally was there in front of the Shaykh and I benefited. But I will just mention one or two, inshallah. The first is I made a trip with a very good friend of mine to Jazan to visit some of the scholars there for a week. And so and that trip was a very heartfelt trip. It was very deep, and we benefited a lot, and it requires a separate video. But the shahid is, when I came back to Medina and I met my Shaykh, I was telling him of my experience in Jazan, and the Shaykh was holding me here, and I was explaining to him my experience in Jazan and what I saw from generosity from the scholars and how they were in humbleness, and something wallahi ajab that I haven't seen before that. And when he heard that from me, he was listening attentively, and by the time I finished, he said, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, هؤلاء هم أهل الكرم لو رأيت الشيخ أحمد النجمي كيف أكرمني. He after glorifying Allah, he said, indeed they are a people of generosity. If only you saw how Shaykh Ahmed al-Najmi, who was an older Shaykh that lived in Jizan before, like 10 years ago, he said, if only you saw how Shaykh Ahmed al-Najmi, how generous he was to me when he invited me to his house and let me stay over. And this is something that is ma'roof. The generosity of the people of Jazan is well known, well documented. Even Sudais, when he visited, he even made lines of poetry praising them for the generosity that is well known from them. Another mawqif that I had with the Shaykh was one time I was asking him about an incident that occurred with me and a brother from the UK that came for Umrah, I met randomly and I was giving da'wah to. And I was explaining the shahada to him, and I was trying to explain witness. I was basically explaining the meaning of I bear witness, meaning I acknowledge, I testify. So I wanted to double check this understanding that I said tilqa'i, and I wanted to double check. And so the Shaykh, he said, نعم أعترف وأقر, I acknowledge and I testify. And so alhamdulillah, he said, just like the witness in the court, he's a shaheed, just like that. And then he said to me, how do you say shaheed in English? And so I said to him, witness. And then the Shaykh tried to pronounce it, and he said, wis. And then I said, witness. He said, wis. Forget it. So that was from the mawaqif that I had with the Shaykh. طبعا the mawaqif with the Shaykh are many, and the fawaid are many, but not to bore the listener, nor to lengthen this jalsa or this small reminder. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to have mercy upon the Shaykh for benefiting us and the Muslims inside in Medina and outside of Medina. The Shaykh had much efforts and in helping the Muslims across the globe, whether in Medina or in the villages or the other cities or in other countries. The Shaykh visited many times Europe and gave da'wah to the Muslims and non-Muslims alike. He would be welcoming to people that came to him from the mu'tamireen and from the students. And he was a person that used to give inayah and a lot of concern to the students. He was well known in his time as a teacher in the Islamic University of Medina for giving reminders after Salatul Dhuhr. After the Dhuhr prayer, he would give reminders to the students in Kulliyat al-Hadith, and he would give reminders to the students in Kulliyat Sharia. And this was something that was a daily occurrence, something that the students in the mid-90s would benefit a lot from, to the point, that extent that it reached us, who came many years later. The Shaykh had his biography. Of course, I never mentioned, not to make it too long, but perhaps I'll share something written from his biography of how he was in a military education at the beginning. Then he started late into the Islamic University of Medina, and he worked his way up all the way to PhD. How he actually he never had any secondary school certificates because he was in the army education, where he had to go study secondary school with kids, a bunch of kids, and he was already older in age, and he would do so being patient. And he was a teacher already. He would be patient, and he would continue all the way to a PhD, and later he became Ra'is Qism al-Sunnah, the head of the Qism al-Sunnah in the Faculty of Hadith, from other manasib, well known to the scholars and praised by the scholars. And we ask Allah Azza wa Jal to have mercy upon him. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to allow us to benefit from his knowledge that he's left behind from books and audios and lessons. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to allow his family members and close relatives and friends to be patient upon this. Allahumma ajirna fi musibatina wa akhlufna khayran minhu, wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.